What's up everyone, it's an Side here, and today I'm going to be doing my 1-year EDC update on the CJRB Centros. So if you guys have been keeping up with my channel recently and have been keeping up with my channel for a really long time, which there's a few of you out there, you know that about a year ago I started to really get into more knives, so expect some more EDC updates in the future. I've already done one on the Para 3 Lightweight and one on the Benchmade Griptilian, so if you're interested in those, feel free to check them out. But anyway, let's get into this knife. And so I actually have two of these Centroses. This one haven't really used all that much, but this one is one that I hard used. You know, it was one of those things where I didn't really hard use that one all that much, but then when I got this one, it was like, well, I have two knives, so might as well make one a beater, make one not necessarily a safe queen because it's like 40 bucks, but make it one that I just don't carry and use as much, and I'll just use for lighter tasks. So let's get into just like the anatomy of these knives. Oh, and also this knife, it is a splatter paint acid etch finish that I did on there because it was scratched from use and from sharpening. I think it turned out pretty good, but it's one of those things where I a lot of times experiment with mods on these knives. Like also this one was a red dyed finish, and it was originally this green G10 handle scale. So these knives, like I said, they sit around $40. Depending on the color you get, they kind of vary, but usually that $35 to $40 mark. I just checked Blade HQ. You can probably find them cheaper other places. It's just one of those things that they hover around that $40 mark. They have a D2 blade, a G10 handle with a liner lock running on bearings, thumb stud deployer, designed by Dylan Mallory, made by Artisan Cutlery in China. And if you guys are wondering, you've probably noticed that I have not really had any Chinese knives on here in a while, and truthfully I don't really have much to say about it. You know, I have been getting some Taiwan Spydercos, but it's one of those things where on these controversies in the knife world, I kind of just stay in the middle, because if I choose a side, then I kind of limit myself and restrict myself to one thing. Like if I came out and said I will no longer buy any Chinese knives, you know, what if there's one that I really want to review? Then I seem like a hypocrite for getting it. But it's one of those things where I'm kind of just staying in the middle on this. I do really like to support USA made knives, and there are tons of advantages, like you usually get higher quality, you usually get a better warranty. So it's one of those things where I prefer to get USA made knives. I'm not completely against Chinese knives, but I really do like the designs and just the upgrading quality you are getting with some USA made knives. But anyway, on to this video. Sorry for a little bit of a ramble there. But for the looks, how this has held up over time, so this one is a little bit hard to say for that, but this stonewash finish and this D2, let me try and get this on here. Hopefully you guys can see this, but there is some rust on the blade. Trying to show that here, but it's one of those things that's kind of hard to pick up because it's not much, it's just little rust speckles. And so I think that the stonewash finish, kind of the rust shows up a little bit easier on that. What you can do if you get rust, there are many different things. I'll use an alcohol prep pad if that works and I can get it off fast. If that doesn't work, I have a rust eraser that's really just made for cleaning ceramic sharpening stones, but that also will work for that. You can use Fitz polish, all different kinds of things. But I do, one thing that you might be wondering why it rusts, because, you know, a lot of people have D2 and they're like, well, rust isn't really a problem for me. Now, a lot of times with these budget knives, I don't carry them all that much. Like I said, I've been using a lot more of these like more expensive knives to carry, just because I have more enjoyment out of them. They are higher quality, I trust the lock a little bit more, they have just better materials in general. And so a lot of times these D2 G10 budget knives will just kind of sit in the case along the side, and so I'm not really maintaining them as much as they need to, so this D2 will show rust on it. So that's one of those things where I've seen CJRB, they are moving away from D2, they're pushing more of that 12C27 and their new ARPM or whatever proprietary steel. So I'm glad they're doing that, and I'm glad that they're going away from D2 now, if only other companies would as well. So let's talk about just the blade of this knife, or just how the blade has held up. So it is a spear point style blade. I really have no complaints with the blade shape. I'm not really that picky when it comes to blade shapes, but I do have my favorites. It is a little bit interesting because it's almost like the belly is down here and the straight is down here. A lot of times you'll see that flip-flop on something like a regular drop point where the belly's up here, the straight is down here. So it's one of those things where I'm not opposed to this blade shape, and overall it works fine. The tip on here is pretty thin. I have not broken it or anything, so it's not that bad, but it's one of those things where you could very easily break this by doing some sort of prying, which I don't suggest, but people use their knives how they want to. I can't really tell them what to do. But this D2, I haven't really noticed any heat treat issues with it. It doesn't seem to come super crispy off the stones, but it isn't horrible. And that's one of those things where I'm glad that these companies are moving away from D2, because I don't want to act like a know-it-all and act like I know more than I really do. But what I've heard from more trustworthy YouTubers in the community is that D2 has a very small heat treating window. And so what I can get from that is these high scale production companies, let's say they have 100 different D2 blades in a heat treating kiln, I guess you could say. There's going to be some that get a little too toasty and some that are a little bit rare. And so it's one of those things where if it's like a custom maker using D2, doing a special D2 heat treat protocol, you're probably going to get the full potential of the steel. But when these companies do D2 on a mass production scale, you a lot of times will get some lemons here and there. So I am glad that CJRB is moving away from D2. But like I said, I wish other companies like Civivi, Bestech, and Steel would as well. So one issue that I have with these blades is they are pretty thick behind the edge. Now I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time, but I'll do a quick measurement. If you don't care about this, you can move along. But right here, I'm getting 23 thousandths behind the edge. Let me just do a quick measurement up here, and then I will do the other one. So I'm getting about 20 thousandths behind the edge with this, which this one right here, that is not bad. Obviously, I'd be happy if all my knives were like 12 thousandths behind the edge, but I can't get everything I want. Now this one has thickened up. It is at 26 thousandths behind the edge. Both of these knives are flat grind. I noticed on Blade HQ, it said that they are both hollow grind when they are really not. 23 thousandths behind the edge right there. And so yes, these knives are too thick behind the edge in my opinion, and I just hope that knives really get thinner behind the edge. That's one thing where Civivi is good at. I'm not trying to make a comparison between brands, but they grind their knives very thin, so I wish CJRB would follow in doing that. I really haven't tried out any of their new stuff, but hopefully it gets a little bit thinner. I would like to see a lot more hollow grinds. I think that is a very good thing, and I wish that all companies would make hollow grinds, because I honestly see nothing but advantages. You might argue strength, but I don't think there's anything that you're going to do that would break a hollow grind that wouldn't break a flat grind. That's just my opinion, but let's get into my overall conclusions for the blade. I guess I could say I wish it was thinner behind the edge. I wish they used a different blade steel, and that's really my only complaint. And you guys know that I really care about edge geometry, so maybe I'd get one reground, but a regrind on this would cost more than the actual knife, so I don't really know how bad I want to do that. But for the fit and finish and lockup, and CJRB's fit and finish, that's one thing where I really wish that they would improve. And CJRB, one good thing about them is they seem to really listen to the community, but I have seen some very poorly fit and finish knives. This one is off center, slightly favoring the clip side. This one is on center, and the centering on these, it kind of just goes on and off. I can't really tell how to fix it, but one thing with the lockup is these liner locks, both of them have some lock rock. So this one, I hard use that, so don't really take that one, don't really take it as a fact. But this one, as you can hear here, or as you can hear right now, I hope you could hear that, but there is a little bit of lock rock there. Now, I don't think that this knife is going to fail on me. I'm not going to do some serious spine wax with it, but it's one of those things where I don't think a lot of these companies doing these budget liner locks are not very well done. And I guess I'm just a little bit spoiled with knives like Spyderco's liner locks and this Gale Bradley 2. That has just a super solid lockup, but it's one of those things where I wish they would fix these liner locks to where they have 100% solid lockup. There have been some, like this one when I first got it, if I slow rolled it out of the box, it would not completely lock up on me, and I could fail it with hand pressure like this. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that anymore, but it's one of those things where this one probably has, this one has a little bit of lock rock too. So it's one of those things where CJRB, yes, I am using a lot of strength to force out that lock rock, but I can't do that with every liner lock that I have. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm just some insane hard user that needs a cold steel triad lock on every single knife when I really don't. But it's one of those things where I like the sense and the security of having a strong lockup, because even though I'm not really putting much pressure on the spine of my knife when I'm using it and cutting, it's one of those things where I like to know that I have a strong lockup on my knife. So it's one of those things where CJRB, I wish they would improve the quality of these liner locks, and I wish that the overall quality control team there, or if one even exists, if they could, really improve how these knives come out of the box, because I've had some pretty bad ones. I've seen people with some pretty bad ones, and like if someone's trying to save up for their first knife and they get one that is just in horrible condition, that's not very good. There's some of these knives, like I originally got this mini feldspar here, and it had very horrible detent lash, something that you can notice just by picking it up. It would shake. It was some of the worst detent lash that I have ever seen. And so it's one of those things that I don't think that should have ever come out of the factory. So I wish that they would really improve that quality control there, because there are competitors out there in the budget knife world that are having knives that are perfectly centered with solid lockup 100% of the time and very good fit and finish. So I think that in order to, make themselves ahead of the competition, they need to get these, the quality control under control, I guess you could say. And a lot of people are probably like, well, I've owned tons of CJRBs and I've never had an issue, and I've seen a ton that have never had an issue. Well, I have, I think, 5 of them, and so I have pretty much every one of them is off center in a little bit. This one is on center, but it has definitely been off center when I've had it. So it's one of those things where I could just fix centering, but I wish that was like that out of the box. Now, like I said, you are getting a $40 knife, so there are exceptions to it, but it's one of those things where I think that it would really improve how big of a factor they are in the competition when they improve their quality control. And a lot of times you'll see YouTubers that have knives that have no issues at all. It's one of those things where when CJRB sends them a knife, not trying to say they're dishonest, but if I was a company sending a YouTuber a knife, I would not just grab a random one. I would get one that seems perfect. I would probably hand tune it myself, try and get it the best that it can be, and then send it to them. So it's one of those things where a lot of times, let's say I'm buying a CJRB, it's going to be my first knife. I really want a quality knife. Then I see some YouTuber who has one with perfect fit and finish, and then I go buy mine and it's a lemon. It's one of those things where I wish that they would improve that quality control. But tangent/rant over, let's get on to the ergonomics of this knife. And overall, I am pretty impressed. So originally when I saw it, when you're holding it lightly, it might not be the most comfortable thing, but when you really bear down on it, there aren't really that many issues. This pocket clip, I wouldn't call it a hot spot for my hand, but you do feel it in your hand. And also this little notch right here, it is placed, or one thing I think that's Dylan Mallory's kind of design signature kind of thing, but my fingers, I can't really fit all 3 of my fingers in front of it, and I can't really fit 2 fingers in it. That's just too spread out. But when I grip it like this and don't really care, I don't feel that notch at all. So it's one of those things where the ergonomics are overall solid on this. My only complaint with them, I guess, would be that it could feel a little bit toothpicky. If you guys have heard that before, like my fingers do touch my palm. It's probably, it's one of those things where it's not uncomfortable, but a lot of times the wider and thicker handles really do provide better ergonomics just because they're thicker and beefier in your hand. So now let's talk about the carry of this knife, and overall it's a pretty decent weight. I don't have the exact measurement with me, but this pocket clip, I don't really have any complaints with the tension or anything. My only complaint would be that the clip is not recessed and the screws are not recessed, so it gives you barely any room to get it over your pocket. So a lot of times if you just slip it back in your pocket, the pocket will be all the way up to here and just not go over those front screws. Now you can fix it, but you gotta push the knife down and pull your pocket up. It's one of those things where it's probably not gonna be that big of a deal, but you might have to do that every time, so it could be a little bit irritating. And I've seen them improve and do better pocket clips with their newer knives. And that's one thing I like about CJRB, is even though they have their issues with quality control and like the quality of the liner locks, they really do listen to the community, because a lot of people have complained about D2. They moved to 12C27N in their new proprietary steel. A lot of people have complained about G10. They are switching to some, or not 100% micarta, I don't think, but they're using a lot more micarta. So it's one of those things, and also with the pocket clips, their new pocket clips on the RIA at least is recessed with recessed screws. So I think that they really do a good job listening to the community, but I just wish that they would fix that fit and finish, that little bit of an issue there. So for the action of these knives, the action, it's pretty impressive. Now it is just a liner lock on bearings, so it is a very smooth action, and it's one of those things where if I saw this a couple years ago, I'd be very impressed, but it's like you kind of expect it nowadays. It does drop to your thumb, and just these bearing actions are good, but one thing I don't like about bearings that much is they're just not that smooth sounding. It's not something like washers, like Teflon washers are especially very smooth, but like this one, it's just super hydraulic and smooth. Bearings aren't really like that, and that's not really an issue because, I mean, they do have a pretty tuned action for the price point. But one thing that was probably my biggest complaint with the action is the detent on these thumb stud models is like a detent on a flipper model. If you look at this, I barely even need any effort to just flick that knife out. Like pretty much no effort at all, and it will flick out. But it's one of those things where a lot of times with thumb stud knives, I like to do a little bit of a thumb roll, and so a lot of times it will kind of jump out of my hand when doing that. So in order to do a thumb roll, I kind of got to move fast like that. Same with this one. Kind of got to move fast because it's like 2 steps there, and then also another one. It's like there. So a lot of their thumb stud detents are tuned like a flipper should be. If you just flick out your thumb studs, it's probably good for you. But, you know, I like to thumb roll a lot of mine. So I do like a knife with a softer detent like this, where there is pretty much no resistance when breaking that detent. And as you can see here, the detent strength on a 21. Now, I don't mean to compare a $500 knife to a $40 knife, but that is a pretty weak detent. And then on this one, it is a lot stronger of a detent. So it's one of those things I wish they would lighten up the detent on it. Now for the value, I can see the real appeal to this value because, you know, $40, it's got D2, G10. It's pretty much your stereotypical budget knife other than it's a thumb stud and not a flipper. And so I am kind of tired of these knives, but it's one of those things where this came out a year ago. And so, you know, Civivi was still a thing there, and that is kind of where I feel like it all started with the whole D2, G10 flipper liner lock craze. But so I'm not really going to give it a knock on that because it's not like they're coming out with this now. And so I think that the budget or the value is there. I just wish that they would kind of get their quality control. They would improve it a little bit to where it's more consistent with every single knife that they have. I'm glad that they switched away from D2, but I don't really like D2, as I said before. The liner lock isn't really that strong of the liner lock, and I don't trust it all that much. And so those are pretty much my complaints. Now, for a value, I think that is a good value. But personally, for me, I would just, honestly, I have 5 CJRBs. Let's say every single one of them costs $40, and that's $200 worth of CJRBs. So it's one of those things where I'd honestly rather have a $200 knife than 5 $40 knives. But that might just be me. You guys might care about quantity over quality. I just am on the other hand of that. So that's going to do it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching. I guess my final conclusions would be that overall this is a good knife, but I wish it was thinner behind the edge. I wish that the liner lock was a little bit better. I wish the pocket clip was improved. I wish that the detent was tuned for thumb stud more than it would be for a flipper. But, you know, those are some pretty hefty complaints, but at the end of the day, it still is a solid knife. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.